Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. Ashhadu anna Muhammadar Rasulullah. Ashhadu anna Muhammadar Rasulullah. Ayala salah. Ayala salah. Ayala falah. Ayala falah. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. La ilaha illallah.
Assalamu alaikum. Alhamdulillahi na'maduhu wa nasta'inuhu wa nastaghfiruhu wa a'udhu billahi min shururi anfusina sayyiati wa amalina. Man yahdihillahu fala mudilla lahu wa man yudlil fala hadiya lahu. Wa ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lahu wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluhu. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu taqullaha haqqa tuqatihi wala tamuna nila watum muslimun. Ya ayyuhanasut taku rabbakum lati khalaqakum min nafsin wahidatin wa khalaqa minha zawjaha wa batha minhuma rijalan kathira wa nisaa wa taqulu alladhi tasa'aluna bihi wal warhama inna Allaha kana alaykum raqiba. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu taqullaha wa qulu qawlan sadida yusli lakum a'malakum wa yaghfir lakum dhunubakum wa may yuti Allaha wa rasulahu faqad fawzan athima. Amabad. Praise be to Allah. We seek His help and ask for His forgiveness. We seek refuge with Allah from our evil self and from our bad deeds. Whoever Allah guides will never be led astray. Whomsoever Allah leads astray, no one can guide. I bear witness that there is nothing worshipped except Allah. He is the one. Allah has no partners. And I bear witness that Muhammad is His servant and messenger. O you who believe, fear Allah as you should be feared, and do not die except as Muslims. O mankind, fear your Lord who created you from one soul and created from it its mate and dispersed from both of them many men and women. And fear Allah through whom you ask one another your mutual rights, and do not cut off the relationship of the wombs. Indeed, Allah is an ever watcher over you. O you who believe, fear Allah and speak the truth. He will amend your deeds and forgive you your sins, and whoever obeys Allah and His messenger has certainly attained a great achievement. Amabad. Fa'ina khairu hadithi kitabullah wa khairu hadi Muhammadin wa shuru umuri muhtathathuha wa kula muhtatatin bida wa kula bitatin dalala Wakula dalalatin finnar. Indeed, the best hadith is the book of Allah, and the best guidance is the guidance of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the worst of matters are those innovated by the people, and every innovated matter is a bid'ah, and every bid'ah is astray, and every going astray is in the fire. Amabad. I pray to Allah that He has forgiven us our sins from the last Jummu'ah to this one, and from this Jummu'ah to the next. Okay, Assalamu alaikum. Na'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim. And we have revealed to you the book with truth, verifying what is before it of the book and the guardian over it. Therefore, judge between them and what Allah has revealed, and do not follow their low desires from the truth that has come to you. For every one of you did we appoint a law and a way. And if Allah pleased, He would have made you all a single people, but that He might try you in what He gave you. Therefore strive with one another to hasten in virtuous deeds. To Allah is your return, and of all of you, so you will so he will let you know in which you differed. And that's is Surah Al-Ma'idah, the 5th surah. That's the 48th ayat. Of course, my Christian family is celebrating Christmas. Wanted to wish our Christian family happy holidays. Of course, we don't celebrate Christmas, but we wish that, for our Christian family, that if they're aware of our Eids, and that they could wish us a happy holiday as well during the time of our Eids. So basically, this year, every year when I do Khutbahs in and around Christmas time, I always do I would call an annual Khutbah that says why Muslims do not celebrate Christmas. And this year, being spared from that, in favor of the 6th installment of America Destiny versus Fantasy. In the last Khutbah, we discussed the pre-Columbian presence in America. We did forget to mention Master Abu Bakr II's voyage in 1311 CE. Master Abu Bakr, or Master Abu Bakr II, I said he was the brother of Master Musa. Master Musa was a more famous brother. Master Musa made a Hajj, in which he took about I think approximately 600,000 people with him on his entourage, and he had so much gold that he changed the economies of the countries that he visited. I think while he was staying in Egypt, he was interviewed, and he was asked how he came into power, and he said that his brother was on the throne. His brother had, and this started in my book, how he did a lot of preparations, a lot of what I call pompous circumstances and stuff to prepare and to go over into the Americas. First, he sent 400 ships, 200 of men and 200 of supplies over in 1310. Only one ship returned. So he became curious, and then he went over here with 2,000 ships, 1,000 of men and 1,000 of supplies. So basically, that's kind of finishes off what we were dealing with, the last Khutbah, and that had a great impact. This Khutbah is kind of dealing with the colonization of the white Christianity. That there is a difference. This is kind of the Christianity where that turned all the Moors, all the Moors, meaning dark-skinned people, turning them into, pale-skinned folks, or i.e. white folks. So that there's so much, to affect us in terms of wiping out our faces of the past, in which Malcolm X called Christianity white nationalism. But we're going to go into that. It's not exactly the subject of the Khutbah. The subject of the Khutbah is definitely what happened during the time of the colonization, and I'm going to be reading an article as well. But we know that when the Muslims came over here, Abu Bakr and the other voyagers of the Muslims, that they did not, disturb or destroy the people's natural and traditional religions. That they became Muslims, some of them did, alhamdulillah, but they didn't go and force people to become Muslims. Whereas Islam, and that's the edict of what is in the Quran, and where it says, there's no compulsion in religion. Surely the right way has become clearly distinct from error. Therefore, whoever disbelieves in Shaitan and believes in Allah, he has indeed laid hold of the firmest handle which shall not break off. And Allah is hearing and knowing. And that's in Surah Al-Baqarah, 256 ayat. You understand that during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, that he had to fight the Meccans, for the survival of Islam. This says that Muhammad led his followers against Mecca, and and against the other Arab tribes, Christians and Jew communities who had submitted to Muslim rule were allowed to worship in their own way and follow their own family law, and were given a degree of self-government. All right. So in Islam, doctrine is different from Christianity, and now we're going to find out the doctrines of the Christianity and what the Christian doctrine is in terms of falsely converting people toward Christianity. You had the papal bulls started with these papal bulls. I probably had said them already in a Khutbah. I'm not sure whether I did or not, and while I have recorded these Khutbahs. But in previous Khutbahs that I've given, I've talked about the papal bulls. I'm going to go through them kind of quickly because there's a lot of information in this Khutbah that I wanted to go over. So this Khutbah is probably going to be about the longest one that I've had. So please, you be patient. Definitely. At this point, I wanted to welcome people who are tuning in to Al-Idrisi, Jummu'ah Al-Idrisi Academy. I'm trying to take my time, not trying to rush through, because I know this is going to be a pretty much of a long Khutbah. But in Al-Idrisi Academy, this is our home school, and this is our third year of operation. And of course, during COVID-19 and the masjids closed, Jumu'ah is part of the curriculum, but with the closures of the masjid or restrictions in terms of the masjids, we are, holding this Khutbah here, and have so since the restrictions came into being. So I wanted to go over the papal bulls very briefly. It started in 1095. Pope Urban II had a papal bull called had Terra Nullius. Terra Nullius means empty land, where they declare any land that was not Christian that can be discovered by any Christian government and declared empty land, like nobody was there. This is basically how Columbus, quote unquote, discovered America, while this was people here and civilization here already. Okay, Roman Pontifex, and Dum Diversus were both given in 1452 by Pope Nicholas V. Roman Pontifex means Roman bishop, and Dum Diversus mean until different. And what it did was give the right of enslavement to. Let me read the. It says in terms of the Roman Pontifex, because this is very, very key and very, very important to understand. Here, in Dum Diversus, the one that says until further notice, it said, "We grant you, kings of Spain and Portugal, by the present documents, with our apostolic authority, full and free permission to invade, search out, capture, and subjugate the Saracens." Saracens is the word that they use, for the Muslims, and pagans and any other unbelievers and enemies of Christ, wherever they may be, as well as their kingdoms, duchies, counties, principalities, and other property, and to reduce their persons into perpetual slavery. Okay. And you would also find there was the next papal bull that came out in 1456, and that was issued by Pope Calixtus III. And this bull reaffirmed that the Portuguese had the right to reduce infidels and Moors to servitude, and this reinforced the papal bulls before it. So this one, said if anybody that was not a Christian, you go into the land and enslave them. This is what we find right in the Bible. I think we have it here. Okay. In Deuteronomy, the 20th chapter, the 10th to 17th verse. When you march up to attack a city, make its people an offer of peace. If they accept and open their gates, all the people in it shall be subjected to forced labor and shall work for you. If they refuse to make peace and engage you in battle, then lay siege to that city. When the Lord your God delivers you into your hand, put to the sword all men in it. And as for the women and children and the livestock and everything else in the city, you may take as plunder for yourselves. That's in the Bible. So we understand that Christianity had came to do. Correct. I want to read this parts of this article, but this article actually is a bit how can I say? It really has to deal with how when after the Colombian invasion, or those who came right after Columbus and started colonizing this. We understand Columbus came in for the Spanish crown, and we understand that there was some interaction between them and the Portuguese. Of course, Spain and Portugal was right next to each other, and we understand this. What I'm reading about this article took place in the 1580s. By then, Spain and Portugal were under one crown. So I'm gonna read this. This was basically a booklet, but I took certain parts of the article. I wanted to read it, and it's a bit lengthy, but I wanted to read it to get the idea of what actually happened in terms of the colonization in America. Okay, because we understand that the purpose is to increase our knowledge, increase our consciousness of what America and how this came about, but eventually it became into what we call the United States. So this article is called Turks, Moors, and Moriscos in Early America, and it's by Dr. Umar Farouk Abdullah. Fact is sometimes changed into fiction. One very unusual, little-known event took place at the dawn of American colonial history in 1586. That year, Sir Francis Drake, who lived from 1540 to 1596, the famous English seaman, discoverer, and privateer, and we'll explain what privateer means later, brought at least 200 Muslims, and he said identify as Turks and Moors, and which likely included Moriscos, to the new established English colony of Roanoke on the coast of present-day North Carolina. The Roanoke settlement was England's first American colony and constitutes the first chapter of English colonial history in the New World, what ultimately became the history of the United States. Only a short time before reaching Roanoke, Drake's fleet and some 30 ships had liberated these Muslims from Spanish colonial forces in the Caribbean. They had been condemned to hard labor as galley slaves. Okay, so we know about Roanoke. We had visited Roanoke Island, of course. Except you. But we all visited Roanoke Island. That's where this aquarium was. That was the first colony, remember? So we passed the signs and saying this was a lost colony and things. Okay. So it happens that Roanoke colony fell after a few years, but its brief existence lasted from 1585 to 1590. The colony was initially founded as a privateering base to attack Spanish shipping in the Caribbean, and was part of the mounting sea war between England and the Spanish Empire, one that culminated in the Spanish Armada's unsuccessful attack on England in 1588. Okay, so it's found a privateer, and I think we're going to go to what the privateers actually are. It's not a coincidence that the Spanish reports of Drake consistently referred to himself and other European privateers who attacked Spanish shipping as corsairs. And they say the term for Muslim privateers. At the time, the corsairs of North Africa and Morocco were at the peak of their power. Drake, his close friend Sir Walter Raleigh, who was the moving force behind the Roanoke colony, and many other English privateers knew the Corsairs well. They had amicable relations with them and sometimes even joined their fleets. So when we talk about privateers are actually pirates. The difference between the privateers and the difference between the pirates is that privateers did the pirating on behalf of a government, while the pirates were like free agents. You know, you see all the pirate movies and stuff, and now the pirates speak English. That's the reason for that. Okay. They were also the pirates that were Moors. They were from Moorish countries, North Africa especially. And according to some of the people in the Moorish Science Temple, that they had the Jolly Roger, the skull and bones was their idea. And that's what they say. Contemporary Spanish reports were not completely mistaken in their view that there was certain affinity between English and European privateers and the formidable corsairs, whom the Spanish continually battled on the high seas or encountered in privateering raids. In fact, the corsairs were most probably one of the sources of the Turkish and Moorish prisoners that the Spanish had condemned to hard labor in the Caribbean war galleys. Recent historical studies have brought to light the fact that there were significant numbers of Muslims in the New World during the colonial period who lived a generally clandestine existence as slaves and occasionally free laborers. So now that matches up with what we already said in terms of the pre-Muslim contact with the America, right? And so the contact with Islam has been consistent all the way up to the date. You know, so I'm gonna read on. The British settlement in the New World got off to a slow and difficult start. On the other hand, there were already been significant British settlement in the Muslim world during the same period. An English observer noted in 1577 that the wise and better-minded off Englishmen and women were leaving England to live in other lands such as France, Germany, and North Africa. Muslim societies were open to immigration from Christian lands. In the eyes of the underprivileged Europeans, such Muslim societies were meritocracies, and when compared to the severe restrictions based on birth that confronted them in European societies, where it was difficult to advance beyond the class into which one was born. So that means that if your father was a blacksmith, you were destined to become a blacksmith. You know, in Islamic societies, you know, if your father was a blacksmith, you could become a scholar. Okay, and there was no restriction in terms of what your family did. Okay, that's what that means. Attraction to the Muslim world was not unique to the British. Western European immigrants living in Algeria during the early 17th century were numerous and influential. Even when the heavier British migration to North America began in the late 1620s, talking about the Mayflower and all that stuff, Britons living in Moorish North Africa and elsewhere in the Muslim Mediterranean continued to outnumber their cousins in the American colonies for years. Okay, so there was a type of affinity between the British, and then we're going to be explaining why. Okay, between the British and the Muslim world, as opposed to the Catholic Spain. Around the time of the foundation of Roanoke colony, United Spain and Portugal constituted the most powerful nation of Western Europe. Even before their union in 1580, Spain and Portugal had prevailed as masters of the Western Atlantic Ocean and had claimed and enforced the exclusive right to colonize the Americas, which the Pope had officially endorsed in the Treaty of Tordesillas in 1494. In the treaty, the Pope granted Portugal the unique right to colonize Brazil, while other lands falling west of Brazil, namely the remainder of what is now North, South, and Central America and the Caribbean, were to be permanent monopoly of the Crown of Spain. When the Roanoke colony was founded, the Spanish regarded the new English colony as a direct legal and political encroachment on their exclusive colonial domain. Early colonial Virginia included Roanoke in the present-day North Carolina. By enforcing its unique right to colonize the Americas, The Spanish Empire was determined to extend its political power and keep the New World an exclusive domain for itself and the Roman Catholic Church. In addition to this ideological agenda, however, Spain was fundamentally concerned with protecting its wealthy fleets of treasures, ships laden with silver, gold, and other riches, which regularly made their way out of the Gulf of Mexico and the Caribbean Sea through the treacherous narrows of the Bahamian Channel on their way back to Spain. So they were getting all the wealth and everything from the Americas and taking it back to Spain, enriching both the Spanish crown and the Pope of Rome. Okay. The treasures of these ships lured pirates and privateers from near and far and were constantly in danger of attack. Spain rightfully feared that any non-Spanish colony established in North America's Atlantic coastline would serve as a privateering base to attack Spanish shipping. This was in fact the basic purpose of the Roanoke colony. It was the basic purpose of the Roanoke colony. When Spain learned of the Roanoke project, its primary motive for seeking to locate and destroy the colony was to prevent it from becoming a privateering base for the English. At the time of Roanoke's founding, Queen Elizabeth I, Queen Elizabeth II on the crown right now, was constantly sending forth swarms of English privateers to attack the Spanish treasure fleets. This epoch was the great period of English privateers who were involved in an undeclared naval war with Spain. On the average, England could send over 100 privateering ships a year to attack Spanish Caribbean trade. Their activity was a major reason for the formation of the Spanish Armada. Yet, despite Spanish attempts to stop them, the English privateers remained highly successful. Sir Walter Raleigh, that's who Raleigh's named after, and Sir Francis Drake were key figures in these successful privateering ventures among their greatest financial beneficiaries. You know, they got rich doing it, of course. Despite the success in attacking Spanish shipping, English privateers were greatly impeded by the lack of ports on the American side of the Atlantic. They clearly understood that their privateering operations would be much more effective if based in America. Okay, that's how the British entered into the Americas. Okay. Unlike the Plymouth colony, which Pilgrims settled in 1620, Roanoke was predatory. Predatory, meaning predator is one that goes on the attack. All right. From the outset, attacking Spanish treasure ships of the Caribbean was its lifeline and reason for being. Okay. So we talk about Jamestown. Jamestown was also a privateering colony. That's why the so-called, well, they wouldn't want to call us the first slaves, but they weren't indentured servants, but they intercepted a Spanish ship. So I say the Portuguese was Portugal and Spain was under the same crown. There in the Gulf of Mexico, and taking that ship, right? And their ships had these, you know, they say Africans. It may not have been Africans. It may have been Aboriginal Americans to the colonies. That was the purpose. Okay, that these were privateer ships, pirate ships, basically. So I'm gonna in the first part of the Khutbah. At this point, I'm going to say by saying Akulu Kali Hada Wastaghfirullah Li Lakum. I say these words of mine and I ask Allah forgiveness for me and for you. So this gives us an idea of the intentions of what came, you know, it was called white Christian power. And I want to kind of go to something that was expressed. The first nation on the planet to recognize America's sovereignty as a nation was Morocco. It's a Moroccan empire. The thing is that Queen Elizabeth I and the Sultan of Morocco were correspondents. They were pen pals. They corresponded with each other. They had very good relations because the English were not particularly directly under the Pope because they were part of the Protestant movement, and I think they were, if not the first, but one of the first nations that become Protestant and break away from the Pope. King Henry the Eighth, I believe King Henry the Eighth established the Church of England. So they did things independent of the Pope, and they were part of the Protestant movement. Whereas the Portuguese and the Spanish, they were vassals of the Pope. So basically, in a letter that George Washington wrote, he said that the United States, and now, people saying, we then are splitting up the destiny versus the fantasy. Destiny is what was true and what America is returning to. And the fantasy is what's been projected as America. And we're gonna see the falsehood of that right now. Our own Senate in 1797 stated clearly that the government of the United States of America is not in any sense founded on the Christian religion. Okay? The words appeared in the Treaty of Tripoli, written by George Washington when he was president. It was sent to the Senate by John Adams, who followed Washington as president. He became the second president, John Adams, right? It was read aloud in the Senate and also printed on it for every senator. The senators voted unanimously to ratify, with no dissension noted in any record. And there is little evidence of any public complaints when the treaty was printed in 3 newspapers in Philadelphia and in New York City. Okay, New York was the capital then. So we understand that even the founding father said this was not built on the foundation of Christianity. And we wanted to go to another founding father and what he said in terms of what we see in terms of going back to white supremacy. We established white supremacy being a false doctrine. And this is part of the writing that he said, which leads me to add one remark. He said, this is the last thing he wrote in this passage called Concerning the Increase of Mankind, Peopling of Countries. And I'll tell you his name at the end. That the number of purely white people in the world is proportionately very small. Let me repeat that again. He said that the number of purely white people in the world is proportionately very small. He wrote, all Africa is black or tawny. Asia chiefly tawny. America, and he said exclusive of the newcomers, wholly so. That means black or tawny. Tawny means dark. Black, this is about the darkest. And of course, most people are not exactly black, but okay. And in Europe, the Spaniards, Italians, French, Russian, and Swedes are generally of what we call a swarty complexion. And swarty is a word that means black. Swart means black. I mean, they have a dark complexion, as are Germans also. You see, what Germans view that Queen Charlotte was. Charlotte was a Moor. All right. Now you see how this thing in terms of with the white supremacy and what they want to have America is shattering, because it wasn't even like that. He said the Saxons only accepted who are with the English, make the principal body of white people on the face of the earth. Okay. So up until Obama, everybody was white, Anglo-Saxon, and Protestant, and that was a president. And now it continues, of course, again. The Saxons are people who invaded the British Isles and took over the Anglo-Saxons. The original Britons. Then they have the reconstructed skull, and I think we showed it to you. Complexion is just like ours. I wish their numbers, and he said, I could wish their numbers were increased. And while we are, as I may call it, scouring our planet by to the eyes of inhabitants in Mars or Venus, you knew there were people on other planets. Why should we, in the sight of superior beings, darken its people? Talking about America. Why increase the sons of Africa by planting them in America, where we have so fair an opportunity by excluding all blacks and tawnies of increasing the lovely white and red? But perhaps I am partial to the complexion of my country, for such kind partiality is natural to mankind. And that is written by Ben Franklin. $100 bill. Ben Franklin wrote that. America, ever since, especially in the turn of the 20th century, imported a lot of white people here, and prevented a lot of people who were from what you call countries of color from entering America. And that's still pretty much the same policies today. Okay. So, they always want to accuse Islam as being a religion to force people in to the religion, which we know that that's a lie. If that was the case, India would have been all Muslim, right? Yeah, Eastern Europe would have been all Muslim. But these were places that were under Muslim rule. All of Spain would have been Muslim if that was the case. But when the Moors had Spain, under that rule, they called it the golden age of Judaism, because the Jews were generally the officials in the government. The Christians were allowed to go to the same schools the Muslims went to, and that's how they learned the art of navigation that made them sail over here. When the Moorish government fell, that they were able to come over here and take over the land. And they understood that they were Moors here in this land. So we know that what America is going to happen is going to be returned to the people that it belongs to. I wanted to read a little passage before I close out in terms of how the papal bulls directly affect the American legal system. It said the papal bull Romanus Pontifex of 1455 has served as the basis of legal arguments for the taking of Native American lands by quote-unquote discovery, and continues to do so today. The logic of the rights of conquest and discovery will follow in all Western nations, including those that never recognized papal authority. He's talking about the British. This continued under the Americans after they established the United States. The U.S. Supreme Court ruled in 1823 case, Johnson versus McIntosh, that as a result of European discovery of lands not owned by Christians, the ownership and rights to lands went from the original European conquerors to the Americans by treaties made with the European conquerors. The Native Americans had no say in these discoveries or treaties, nor any rights as non-Christians to the right of title to the land. They only had the right to occupancy in their native lands, as long as permitted by Europeans and their successors to remain there. Since discovery, discovery gave an exclusive right to extinguish the Indian title of occupancy either by purchase or conquest. They could and would be kicked off the land at any time the Americans felt the need to do so. This is and has served as a basis for federal Indian law since 1823. And when we talk about the Indians, we talk about us. The decision was upheld in 1831. Case Cherokee Nation versus Georgia, giving Georgia authority to extend laws over Cherokees within the state, and famously describing the Native American tribes as domestic dependent nations. This decision was modified in Worcester versus Georgia, which stated that the U.S. government, U.S. federal government, and not its individual states had the authority in Indian affairs, but it maintained the loss of right to title upon discovery by Europeans. In recent years, Native American groups included the Taino and the Onondaga, which is part of the Iroquois. The Taino is a part of people that Columbus, first encountered. Have called on the Vatican to revoke the bulls, you just told about it, of 1452, 1455, and 1493. Okay? For the Vatican to revoke those bulls. Okay? The Haudenosaunee, our friends again, who the so-called Iroquois, counted the papal bulls with the two-row wampum, conditionally accepting the bulls, stating through the two-row wampum, "You say that you are our father and I am your son. We will not be like father and son, but like brothers. This wampum belt confirms our words. Neither of us will make compulsory laws or interfere in the internal affairs of the other. Neither of us will try to steer the other's vessel. This forming a perpetual reservation of sovereignty and interest on the Americas." Because the word that I reject is minority. Do you know what minority means? You can't answer it. But minority means to be a minor. And that's the minor is a child. Even in the 1920s, baseball was introducing some, I guess, quote unquote Native Americans, like Jim Thorpe, and saying that we're the great white father. The commissioner of baseball saying, "We're the great white father. We introduce all of you people here." You know, of course, the 1920s and which is kind of like eugenics movement and stuff, which it's reached its zenith in Nazi Germany. So I want to end with this ayat. This ayat in the Quran is a warning from Hud, the Prophet Hud, alayhi salam. And what he was saying to his people. He said, "Indeed, uncleanliness and wrath from your Lord have lightened upon you. What? Do you dispute with me about the names in which you and your fathers have given? Allah has not sent any authority for them. Wait, I too with you will be of those who wait." And the names are given no authorities, like African American, Negro, all that stuff that he calls us. That's not true. It said more, it's a dark-skinned Aboriginal person. It's a description. It's not politicalized. When people try to do that, it's not ethnologized, being that it belongs to a certain group of people. is this a description of a dark-skinned person. Anybody with dark skin is considered a Moor. And we're born here in America, considered American Moors. And of course, being Muslim born in America, indigenous Muslim American Moors. So I've got to really put a countless blessings on the Prophet Muhammad, his family, his companions, and his followers. Any benefit that you receive of this khutbah is from Allah alone. Any mistake, errors, and omission is from me and me alone. Adha Sli Ada Muhammadin wa Ada Ali Muhammadin Qasli Ibrahim wa Ada Ali Ibrahim in Ghabri Majid. Adha Barik Muhammadin wa Ada Ali Muhammadin Kambarati Ibrahim wa Ada Ali Ibrahim in Ghabri Majid. All I send your prayers upon Muhammad, upon the family of Muhammad, as you send prayers upon Ibrahim, upon the family of Ibrahim. You're indeed worthy of praise and full of glory. Allah, you send the blessings upon Muhammad, upon the family of Muhammad, as you sent blessings upon Ibrahim, upon the family of Ibrahim. You're indeed worthy of praise and full of glory. And what we're going to end with to do is, I just want to interject that the American Destiny versus Fantasy will conclude with the next khutbah, inshallah. It'll be part 7. Okay. Rabbana atana fi dunya hasana qurati hasana qina adhaban. I mean, Allah grants good in this world and good in hereafter, save from the punishment of the fire. Allahumma anta salam wa minka salam. Tabadala inkram. I mean, O Allah, you are the source of peace, you cause peace. It's all you, O Lord of majesty and honor. Allahumma gafiri wali wali deya wali. Uzari Jamil Mukmini or Mukminati Muslim Muslimati bi Rahmatika Ayyur Rahim. Oh Allah, forgive me and my parents and my teachers and all the believing men and all the believing women, all the Muslim and all the Muslim women with your mercy, or most merciful, all who have mercy. Ramana Tananda Fusana Matagib Allah Muhammad Nal Kasfirin. I mean, our Lord, we have wronged ourselves, and if you do not forgive us and have no mercy on us, surely we'll be among the losers. I come to Salam.
Allah Akbar, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, Ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. Allah Salah, Allah Salakum, Salakum, Salah, Allah Salah, Allah.
In terms of offering Salat al-Jummu'ah, 2 comes forward for the pledge of Allah. Allahu Akbar. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahman Malik Yawmiddin. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Ihdini siratal mustaqim. Siratal ladzina an'amta alaihim ghayril maghdubi alaihim. Ihdina al-siratal mustaqim. Allahu Akbar. Alhamdulillah. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahman Malik Yawmiddin. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Ihdina as-siratal mustaqim. Siratal ladzina an'amta alaihim ghayril maghdubi alaihim waladdallin. قل الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. الله أكبر. سمعنا وأطعنا. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullah. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullah.